9,000 years before a boy from Tatooine ever touched a control panel, the galaxy already had its chosen one. He was born under a different sky into a different order, one that never taught restraint, never preached balance, and never let its most powerful child grow up in chains. This is the galaxy where Anakin Skywalker was never a slave. He was a Sith. In our timeline, Anakin's story begins in slavery, poverty, a scavenger's life, and a mother he's forced to leave behind. His anger, his fear of loss, his desperate need for control, all of it grows from that soil. Now imagine a different soil entirely. Imagine the ancient warrior empire of the old Sith bloodlines, a civilization built centuries before anyone called themselves Darth, ruled by war chiefs and battle sorcerers who saw the Force not as a philosophy, but as a birthright to be seized. In this timeline, a Jedi scouting party never finds a 9-year-old boy on a desert planet. Instead, the Force-sensitive child is discovered by Sith blood hunters, deep in wild space, and brought before the Sith War Council as an infant, flagged by their oracles as a virgin unlike anything recorded in their scrolls. He is not enslaved, he is claimed. The old Sith Empire does not believe in restraint. It believes in cultivation. And so this child, who in another life would grow up sanding down droids in the Jundland wastes, grows up instead in a war academy built on a foundation of conquest, trained from his first steps to treat the Force as a weapon, and himself as its perfect instrument. The boy, given a new name upon his initiation, but we'll keep calling him Anakin for clarity, shows an aptitude that terrifies even his masters. Where Jedi younglings are taught patience before power, Sith younglings are taught power as patience's replacement. Anakin doesn't need years to master the basics. His raw command of the Force outpaces students twice his age within months. But here's the twist our story hinges on. The very thing that made him dangerous in the Jedi timeline, his attachment, his fear of loss, his refusal to let go of the people he loves, doesn't disappear in this Sith upbringing. It gets weaponized. In the Jedi Order, Anakin's attachments were treated as a flaw to be suppressed. In the Sith Empire, his instructors see something else entirely. A boy who will burn down a star system for the people he loves without hesitation, without doubt, and without the crippling guilt that plagues every other student in his cohort. They don't try to fix this. They cultivate it. Every version of Anakin's story needs a father figure who understands him better than anyone else. In the films, that role is filled, tragically, by a chancellor with a Sith identity, a man who tells Anakin exactly what he wants to hear. In this world, that role is filled by a war mentor who doesn't need to lie to him at all, because there's no deception required. The Sith Empire tells Anakin the truth from day one. Attachment is not weakness. Fear is not something to be ashamed of. Anger, when properly directed, is a tool sharper than any blade. For a boy who spent one timeline being told his love for his mother was a dangerous flaw, imagine what it does to him to instead be told his love is a source of power. By 16, he is already more dangerous than most Sith Lords twice his age. By 20, he commands fleets, and unlike the Anakin we know, isolated, watched, distrusted by a Jedi council that never fully embraced him. This Anakin has never known anything but total belief in his own destiny. That's the horrifying part. He was never conflicted to begin with. Every what if lives or dies on its emotional core, and ours is no different. So let's ask the question that matters most. What happens to the people Anakin loves in a galaxy where he was raised to see love as strength, not sin? His mother is never left behind on Tatooine. Sith doctrine has no patience for sentiment about a slave's freedom, but it has enormous patience for a weapon's motivation. She's brought into his life, protected, elevated, not out of compassion, but because a happy weapon is a stable weapon. And when he eventually meets a version of Padme, a senator, an idealist, someone who believes in a galaxy he was never taught to believe in, their relationship doesn't collapse into secrecy and shame. It becomes something far more dangerous. A partnership. A queen and her blade. An idealist who thinks she can soften him, paired with a man who has never once doubted that he can have both his love and his power. In the original timeline, Padme's death is the tragedy that breaks him. In this timeline, we have to ask something crueler. What does the galaxy look like when nothing ever does break him? An Anakin who never doubts himself, never fears the dark side because he was never taught to call it dark, and never loses the people he loves, is not a redemption story waiting to happen. He's an apex predator with a conscience that was trained from birth to agree with him. In this timeline, the ancient Sith Empire doesn't fracture into infighting the way it does in the sourced history. It doesn't collapse under the weight of its own ambition, because for the first time in its bloody, backstabbing history, it has a weapon whose loyalty was never in question. A chosen one who was never asked to choose between two doctrines, because only one was ever offered to him. The ancient Jedi Order, already locked in a generational war against the Sith, now faces something they've never encountered. A Sith Lord who fights not out of hatred for the light, but out of total, unshaken conviction that his way is simply better. There's no redemption arc coming for this version of Anakin. There's no whisper of good left buried under the anger, waiting for a son to draw it out. Because nobody ever taught him there was anything wrong with who he already was. The real Anakin Skywalker story is a tragedy of a good man's slow corruption. A story about how fear, loss, and manipulation can turn hope into horror. This Anakin story is a different kind of tragedy entirely. It's the story of a boy who had all the same power, all the same love, and all the same capacity for greatness, and simply never had anyone in his life who thought that needed correcting. Because sometimes the scariest version of a hero isn't the one who falls. It's the one who was never given a reason to get back up. If you want to see how the Sith Anakin eventually collides with the Republic, the Jedi, and a war that reshapes the galaxy for the next 10,000 years, make sure you're subscribed because part 2 is coming.